Good morning, everyone. I'm Sandra Kilgore, Vice Mayor of the City of Asheville, and I'd like to welcome you all to the August 17th Agenda Briefing Work Session. All council members and staff are participating virtually. The live meeting will be streamed on the city's YouTube channel, accessed through the YouTube icon on the front page of the city's website via the live stream. The meeting will be available also on Charter's Spectrum channel 193. You may listen to the meeting via phone 855-925-2801, meeting code 6806. And at this meeting, we will not be taking any public comments during this meeting. And today, Mayor Manheimer and Councilwoman Turner will not be in attendance. And council members and staff, please unmute yourself and please say a quick hello once I announce your name. Councilwoman Shanika Smith.
Hello.
Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley.
Hello.
Councilwoman Kim Rooney.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Maggie Ullman.
Hello, everybody.
City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Rachel Wood.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Good morning.
City Attorney Brad Brenham.
Good morning, everyone.
And City Clerk Maggie Burleson.
Good morning.
And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Thank you and good morning again. As you all know, we have these agenda briefings so that we can update both you elected officials as well as the community who are joining us on items that are coming up at our next meeting of council. Today we'll have Rachel Wood going over the agenda. So at this time, I will turn it over to Ms. Wood.
Thank you, Deborah, and good morning. We're going to start with an overview of the August 22nd City Council agenda. By way of quick reminder, we do have a work session scheduled prior to the start of the business meeting, and I'm going to let Ben Woody provide a brief overview of what to expect for that work session conversation.
Thank you, Rachel. And again, good morning, Vice Mayor, members of council. I just want to take about a minute or two just to kind of give a little bit of what to expect at the work session on Tuesday when we discuss the IRC recommendations. And this is kind of an outline of how we plan to approach the work session. First of all, we want to give just a real brief overview of the IRC report itself. Won't spend a lot of time on that because that body made an excellent presentation to council at your June 13th meeting, but we just want to take a few minutes to get everybody kind of re-familiarized with that report and the structure of it. And then what we'll do is pretty quickly go into really what I would frame as the city's kind of project management approach. So kind of the framework that we're using to not only respond to the IRC recommendations, but also the steps that we're taking in terms of how we plan to implement those recommendations as well. So again, we'll give a little bit of background on the city's approach. And then what we're going to do is kind of focus in on each of the subcommittee areas. So if you remember right, the IRC, they formed three kind of topic areas or three subcommittees, and one was water system and operations. The next was emergency management. And the third was communications. So we're going to kind of build our presentation around those three buckets, so to speak. And just a little bit of background on that. The IRC report in total included 37 distinct recommendations. And so what we're going to do is we're going to provide council with a matrix prior to the meeting that'll include an individual response to each of those 37 recommendations, as well as a status update. The other thing that we're going to do is we're also going to provide a presentation in advance of the meeting, but we'll go through that presentation on Tuesday, and we're going to focus in on 3 to 5 key recommendations for each subcommittee. So really what we're going to do is through the course of that work session is hopefully go through about 10, maybe a few more of what I would consider to be the real key recommendations that were included in that report. And of course, you'll also have access to the matrix, so council will have the ability to see all the responses. And then one thing to keep in mind about the format of this is it's not going to be just me talking, which is probably a good thing. As we go through each subcommittee area, we'll have representatives from the departments that are responsible for kind of implementing and working through those recommendations. So you'll see a number of different speakers through the course of the work session. Some will be department directors. You'll even see some project managers that'll be there. We'll have technical folks in the audience to be able to answer your questions. And of course, last thing I'll note is we'll want to stop after each kind of subcommittee area and give council some time to ask questions and interact. So again, we want to make sure that we have the right people in the room from a staff perspective, and that we're providing council with the opportunity to ask questions and make sure we're addressing your concerns. And of course, we'll wrap it all up with a conclusion and kind of next steps. We don't view this work session as the end of our response to the IRC report. We actually view this as the beginning of our response, and we'll continue to keep the community and council updated as we proceed. So I know that was a kind of a long explanation of the work session, but if there's any questions about the format, I'd be happy to try to answer those today. Otherwise, I will see you on Tuesday. Great. Thank you. And I'll turn it back over to Rachel.
Thank you, Ben. So then moving into the business meeting for Tuesday, first on the agenda, we do have one proclamation designating September as Emergency Preparedness Month. And then going into the consent agenda, as is our typical process, I will be covering these items by exception. Of course, if you have questions on items not covered, please feel free to raise your hand and we can address any questions for items I do not cover. We do have a pretty robust consent agenda, and so I'm just going to be highlighting a few specific items. Starting with item B. Item B is a two-part item, including a resolution as well as a budget amendment for the East Patton Avenue Corridor Feasibility Study. The purpose of this study is to evaluate the current NCDOT design for Patton Avenue, which is part of the larger I-26 connector project, and identify opportunities for multimodal transportation, placemaking, enhancing connectivity to existing residential neighborhoods and businesses, and alleviating regional vehicular traffic on Patton Avenue east of the Jeff Bowen Bridge to Spruce Street. The associated budget amendment is for $44,000. The majority of this project is being funded by a $220,000 grant from the MPO. Then moving on to items E through G, I'm actually going to have Tony and Brad cover those items.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Tony McDowell, Finance Director. Item E, and I think this is really a good news story. This is getting approval from City Council to issue the remaining part of our 2016 GO bonds, our $74 million GO bond package that voters approved in November of 2016. And so you all will be adopting a bond order and a bond resolution, like I said, for the remaining amount of the bonds that are outstanding that we haven't issued already. And this will allow us to move forward with the local government commission and our financial advisors to sell these bonds through a competitive sale on September 26, 2023. And with that sale, we will have met the statutory requirement that the bonds all be issued within 7 years of the vote. And so again, this is kind of the final step with issuance of those bonds from that were approved from 2016. So be happy to answer any questions you all have about this item. All right. Next item is an addendum to the tax collection agreement that we have with Buncombe County. As you all probably are aware, we've had a long-standing agreement with Buncombe County in which they collect our taxes for the city. The agreement's been in place for a long time. I think it was last updated in 2019. Recently, the School of Government put out some guidelines around some of the things that should be in those types of agreements that that exists between counties and cities about tax collection. And they want to make sure that all those agreements are in alignment with provisions of Chapter 105 of the North Carolina General Statutes, which is the Revenue Act. And so when we reviewed on our side the agreement and when the county looked at it, we identified a few areas that we needed to update. And so the county has taken the lead on putting together an addendum to the 2019 agreement, and it includes a number of procedural things, one of which is appointing a city tax collector, and you all will be doing that on Tuesday, and you'll also be approving a settlement for the FY 22-23 fiscal year in regards to the taxes that we received from the county. And so that's a quick summary of that item as well. I will say, as a part of this new procedure that's being put in place with this addendum, you all will see moving forward each month on your consent agenda a tax report from the county that gives an overview of the taxes that have been collected, any releases that have been granted for taxes that were owed. And again, you all will be seeing that every month on your consent agenda moving forward as a part of the new terms of this agreement. So again, happy to answer any questions about this one as well. All right. And so I think on the third one, the GE item, I think I'll turn that over to Brad Branham and let him walk you all through that one.
Thank you, Tony. All right. In an effort to have as many tax-related items on your agenda as possible, we found room for one more. And this one's unique. This is something that you have not seen before. It's something that I have not seen before in my time with the city. So I want to go into a little additional detail to explain what's happening here. Within the city, as Tony mentioned, the county generally is responsible for all of the tax collection, and that's something that we contract with them in order to handle. Now, as part of that, in years 2019 and 2020, General Electric, the very General Electric you're thinking of, owns some property in the city of Asheville. It's actually located on Sweeten Creek Industrial Park. And as they do every year, they file what's called a tax listing. That listing shows the personal property, equipment, vehicles, these kind of things that they are required to pay taxes on every year. Now, they did this in 2019 and 2020 for this property. However, in those years, 3 separate entities filed the tax listing. First, an entity by the name of GE Capital, a second entity by the name of GE Industrial, and then finally a third entity, GE Electrical Company, filed a tax listing for personal property that they would owe taxes on, all for the same location at that Sweeten Creek Industrial Park address. Then they proceeded to pay the taxes. All 3 entities paid the taxes on what is essentially the exact same personal property. So I will just be frank and say they paid their taxes 3 times. It seems to be a effect of them having multiple different entities that are running their various businesses and for other tax purposes. In 2023, just earlier this year, a separate entity, GE Healthcare, decided to send a note to the county tax collector, as well as the city, asking for a refund of the taxes that they feel they overpaid for the years 2019 and 2020 on this personal property. Now, there are only so many reasons under state law that the taxes of this nature are allowed to be refunded, and they are defined very specifically by statute. The statute in particular is North Carolina General Statute 105-381, and it gives 3 reasons that you are allowed to refund taxes. One is if it's based upon a clerical error. This is generally something along the lines of the math was done incorrectly. Then it's a tax levy for an illegal purpose. No one is alleging that that's the case here. Or finally, but similar language, an illegal tax. Now, what has happened here appears to be the fact that GE, through its multiple different affiliated entities, paid taxes on the same property multiple times. Now, that tax was paid to the county. A portion of it was then remitted to the city. So the city received some of those funds. So the situation we have before you today is that a demand has been made both to the county and to the city to refund the tax based upon GE's allegation that this was an illegal tax. In conjunction with the county attorney's office and the county tax collector, we have researched the legality of this and determined that there is absolutely no legal basis under the Constitution of the state or otherwise to say that what is essentially double taxation amounts to an illegal tax. And therefore, because of that, we feel as if neither governmental entity has the legal authority under your current limitations to refund the taxes that have already been paid by GE and its various affiliates here. In addition to this, there is also a time frame that they are required to submit appeals to the Board of Equalization and Review, which the county manages, and that was not done in a timely manner either. And based upon this, the county on Tuesday of this week took this matter up at the Board of Commissioners, and upon advice of council, they voted 6-1 to deny the request for the refund. Now, just like the county, you are required to take action on this within a certain amount of time. So on Tuesday, based upon the very similar logic that the county was presented, upon review by my office and the county attorney's office and the county tax collector, we are suggesting that city council needs to take action to respond to the request by GE, but it is our opinion that you do not have the authority to declare that someone paying their taxes twice amounts to an illegal tax under the definition provided in the statute. And because none of the other options apply, we believe that you don't have authority legally to issue a refund for that amount. And just to go ahead and give you all the information, the total amount collected by the city as part of this was $227,007. So that's what we're talking about. A little more than that, but similar amount given to the county. So I'm happy to answer any questions about this, but just to close this out, I will reiterate that the county did take action to deny the request on Tuesday of this week, and it is our recommendation that you also deny this request at your meeting next week.
Thank you for that overview, Brad. Barring any questions on that item, we're going to skip down to items O and P on the consent agenda. Both of these items are related to a new public safety interoperability system. For short, we refer to it as PSIP. This includes an interlocal agreement and service level agreement, which replace our previous criminal justice information system. You may have heard staff refer to CJIS in the past agreement, which was in place starting in 2002. So much needed update to that agreement. And I do want to highlight and commend the efforts of our IT department, finance department, fire and police department for their great work coordinating with the county to update this agreement, improve the governance structure, have clarified terms in the service level agreement. So this is the culmination of about 2 years worth of work with the county, as well as surrounding municipalities and other fire agencies. So item O is approving the interlocal agreement and service level agreement for PSIP. And then item P includes contract amendments so we can process invoices for these services. Moving down to item Q. Item Q is purely procedural in nature. There is no financial obligation or risk to the city. It is an IRS requirement that the city approve housing authority bond issuance. So the requested action is for the city to approve the housing authority's proposed bond issuance of up to $18 million in revenue bonds to finance improvements to the Vanderbilt apartments. So that concludes the items I had planned to cover on the consent agenda. I will then move into the city manager's report. And so the city manager's report, we're going to have a capital projects update. The first portion of that presentation will be delivered by Jay Dundas, our capital projects director, and he's going to provide updates on several recently completed capital projects and provide an overview on a few remaining projects that are being funded using 2016 bond funds. The second portion of that presentation will be an update on the College Patton Bike Lane project, which will include an overview of the different plans that call for additional bicycle connectivity through downtown, specific details on the scope of work of the proposed project, information on engagement efforts that we've had to date on the College and Patton project. And then we're going to have a discussion on next steps regarding where we are in the process and plans to ultimately select a contractor to conduct the work. While we're not requesting a specific vote as part of the city manager's report, we do want to get feedback from council regarding our plans for next steps on this project prior to proceeding with those next steps. So we are requesting feedback as part of the city manager's report item on Tuesday. Moving on to public, oh, I see a hand raised. Yes, Councilmember Roney.
Yeah, I know we've got a lot to cover today, so I'll just note that I have some questions around the bond projects that we committed to at the beginning that were installed early. So for example, the bus shelters, and are the bus shelters all up that we installed? Did they last all 7 years, to be clear? And that was just one example. If there were other issues with projects that were installed early on, that council might also have an update on their current status.
Thank you for that feedback. We'll work on either incorporating that into the presentation or including that in follow-up materials. Okay, barring any additional questions on the Plan City Manager's Report presentation, I'm going to turn it over to Ben Woody to cover the public hearings.
Thank you, Rachel. And Allison, if we can bring up the first image. Thank you. So I know there's a lot of going on this slide, but I'm going to kind of walk through. And this is your public hearing item A, which is along Woodfin and the downtown area. It's known as Project Aspire. Hopefully most of council has at least some familiarity with this project. So what I'd like to do is I want to walk through the concept plan. I think that's important to understand what this conditional zoning encompasses. Then I want to talk a little bit about the approval process, because this is an extremely large and complicated project. So I think it's worth going through kind of what the steps forward may look like. And then finally, I want to walk through the reviews that have occurred and the recommendations that have been provided to this point. So this is a 10.5 acre parcel of land. It's actually 3 parcels that comprise 10 acres. It's a very large development project in terms of footprint for the city, but particularly for the downtown area. And again, this is along Woodfin in our downtown. It begins on College Street, where the State Employees Credit Union is, and extends beyond the First Baptist Church all the way over to where the YMCA is now. As a total, and again, you can see the project total numbers on the slide. Comprises over 1 million square foot of gross floor area. It'll have between 400 and 650 residential units, up to 75,000 square feet of community recreational area. It does include an office component that could be up to 250,000 square feet. The commercial square footage is, as you can see, are between 75,000 and 120,000 square feet. Includes a hotel with between 165 and 300 guest rooms. And finally, 2 parking decks that could be as large as 2,000 spaces. And I think what's important to note on this is this will not be built all at once, because like one component of this is moving the YMCA from its current location over to a new location where the credit union currently is. So it's going to have to be done in phases. And as you can see, we've broken this out a little bit by the phasing. And so the first phase would be on the right-hand side of the image. So again, this is the parcel that's actually south of the First Baptist Church. I know it doesn't look south on the image, but it is south. So this is what's along Woodfin and it butts up to College. That first phase would include some residential units. As you notice, the bulk of the residential units would be in phase 2. The first phase does include some commercial space. It also includes the hotel use. And then finally, the first phase would have the YMCA, or the kind of the community recreational use, as well as one of the parking decks. So the first parking deck would be about an 800 space parking garage as proposed. And just want to note on the first phase, you can see we have building 2. Just want to highlight that's where we have one of the large buildings, and that's a 20-story tall building that would include the hotel and the lodging. When that's complete, the developer would then move to phase 2, which is west of the First Baptist Church. And again, you can see phase 2 has a bigger footprint of the residential units as well as the office component and a larger commercial component. And phase 2 would also be kind of anchored by a tower, a taller building. You can see that would be proposed to be a 19-story building. So that really kind of composes and makes up the square footage and the mix of uses proposed for this project. And I think what's important for council to really understand, and the planning staff will cover this in more detail at Tuesday's public hearing, but the projects being proposed are being reviewed as a conceptual master plan. So this is coming to you as a conditional zoning. You're not approving a specific site plan in the conditional zoning, which you don't normally do anyways. So again, you're approving, you would be considering, and if you approve this project, it would be this conceptual master plan as presented. If it is approved, the next steps would be for the actual phases, so really more the detailed construction drawings, they would be reviewed and approved by TRC, through what we call the final TRC process, which, because it's downtown, also includes reviews by the development or the design review committee and the planning and zoning commission. So again, just to be clear, once council, if you approve this conditional zoning, it will not come back to you for future approvals. The actual approval of the phasing plan and the built elements of this project go through TRC, DRC, and P&Z. That's a lot of acronyms. Go ahead, Councilwoman Roney.
Can you make sure I have some clarity on what you just said? This is the only time that we'll be reviewing this project.
That is correct. The only way it would come back to council would be if they deviate from what you would approve, again, if you do on Tuesday. So if the conditional zoning is approved on Tuesday and their phases and future development approvals are consistent with what's approved on Tuesday, that is correct. They would not come back to city council. It's a good question. And I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that today for council to be able to understand that as we go to the public hearing on Tuesday.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So this is one of the, oh, go ahead, Deborah, I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to make sure, Ben, maybe I didn't hear it, but affordable housing is being incorporated into the residential units. I didn't know if you had said that.
There is some affordable housing proposed in this development. I will need to I don't have this readily available in my notes, but I need to get that exact number. We'll make sure we have more specifics on that Tuesday for council's consideration. Good question.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that there is a proposal.
That is correct.
Affordable housing to be integrated in this concept.
Yep. Councilwoman Roney.
Because we're talking about phasing and also affordable housing, when we provide that clarity to council, can you confirm, because my understanding is that it would be in the potential phase 2.
That is correct, Councilwoman Roney. I will get that confirmed. I know there have been some discussions about including some affordable housing in phase 1, but yeah, we'll need to get those numbers firmed up and make sure that's available to council before you make a decision. And I'll connect with our planning staff after this meeting today. Okay, good questions. And so this is probably the longest approval process I have ever run through on a conditional zoning, but I am going to run you through it. So this project went to the TRC on March 6th of this year and was approved with conditions. It went to our design review committee on March 23rd for an informal review. That was the beginning of that feedback loop between the developer and the DRC. Went to our multimodal transportation commission on April 26th, again for another informal review. I went to our downtown commission on May 12th for their informal review. It went back to the DRC on May 18th for their formal review, at which time the DRC did approve with conditions. It went to the Planning and Zoning Commission on July 19th for a special meeting. It was continued at that special meeting. Then it went back to Planning and Zoning Commission on August 2nd, at which time it was approved with conditions. And then finally, the planning staff does recommend approval. And that kind of brings us to where we're at today, where we're have the public hearing scheduled for council on Tuesday. Any questions? This is a really big project, and I know the planning staff will have a pretty detailed presentation at your public hearing on Tuesday. Councilwoman Ronnie?
I know I already asked some questions. Does anybody else have anything? Okay. I think I have three major ones. I heard earlier, Ben, you were talking about how the weather's changing as we're moving towards the end of summer, and that it's like has those foggy mornings. And I was just thinking about, like, because this is so big, it feels like a little bit of that foggy morning vibe. And I was just trying to like think about some of the rays to shine through so that we were answering people's questions before Tuesday, or maybe knew better how to answer them. One is, it came to my attention that we could consider asking to keep the interior roads public, and instead of it being part of the development. And one of the reasons was, if for some reason financing for phase 2 becomes an issue, it makes it easier to parcel. There were also questions about, is this going to become like a gated community in our downtown? And how can we like prevent that happening in the future? So like a third reason to maybe look at those interior roads being maintained as public was it would reduce the cost of the tax burden for the project, so that maybe we could get some deeper affordability. And I'm just not sure if some of those questions are being brought up by staff, and maybe those need to be brought for Tuesday.
Yeah, that's Councilwoman Maroney. I really appreciate you kind of, sharing some of those questions and thoughts with us today, because it really does give us an opportunity as staff to make sure we're prepared to speak on those Tuesday. I got a message from planning staff that they're watching the briefing, so that's great. So there certainly will be prepared. And real quickly, in terms of the affordable housing question, again, we'll detail this out, but right now both phases are proposed to have 20% of the units affordable at 80% AMI for a minimum of 20 years. But I'll make sure we have a little more specifics on numbers and things like that for each phase. But yes, they're watching and they are taking notes on being prepared.
That's great. And I'll also, because I have talked with some of the developer representatives, I'll go ahead and bring up these other questions too. What is the projected tax value and impact? And then the other one is, I know the developer has been engaging in the East End Valley Street neighborhood, but what does it look like from our side to facilitate making sure that we're getting those questions answered that we're responsible for in this conditional zoning process?
And just if I could, then just for clarity, Ms. Ronnie, when you say an impact, you said the tax value, projected tax value and impact. I'm not sure if you could elaborate a little bit in terms of the impact.
Yeah, when I talked to the developer, sure. When I talked to the developer, there was a talk about like, because this property has been owned by a faith community and a nonprofit, that it hasn't been on the tax roll. So do we have some projections on when we're talking about this no longer maybe being the case? What is the potential revenue that would be coming onto the tax roll? So that can be part of the conversation that I think folks will be curious about for us as we're looking at the list of the community benefits of having affordable housing downtown, of having health access, childcare access, what land use decisions we're making for the future of this arm of our downtown.
Okay, thank you so much for that clarification.
Yeah, thank you again, Councilwoman Ronnie, for that information. And any other questions on public hearing item A? Okay, I'm gonna move to public hearing item B, and again, Allison's gonna bring up a map and some information about this particular request. So this item should look familiar to council. You actually approved a conditional zoning for this project on February 22nd of 2022. This is a new construction on 1.23 acres at the 300 block of West Haywood Street. And what you're doing with this new conditional zoning request is actually an amendment to the original approval. And what it does, it makes some changes to the total number of units for the project, and I'll get into that detail in a minute, as well as some changes to the height of some of the buildings. So what you have is 1.23 acres on West Haywood Road. What's coming before you in terms of the amendment is they're proposing 41 dwelling units located in one building, includes off-street parking, new sidewalks, and the playground. The 41 units is 5 less than the previous approval. So originally it was 46 units. This modifies that to 41 units. It also reduces the height of the building. So we're going to move, or the developer's proposing to move from 4 to 5 stories down to 3 to 4 stories. We're basically losing one level of height in the building. It is an affordable housing proposal. It's actually 100% affordable. So the developer's proposing 100% of the units. So all 41 units will be affordable to those earning at or below 80% AMI. Additionally, 50% of the units, or 21, will be reserved and will accept housing choice vouchers. The other element of this, and Rachel's actually going to cover this as part of the new business. You have two kind of interrelated items on this particular proposal. Is the proposal is also requesting the city of Asheville to provide financing and support for this project. So there was a grant that was provided for the purchase of the property using affordable housing bonds. And of course, there is a housing trust fund loan. And again, I'm going to let Rachel kind of cover the specifics of the financial subsidy from the city of Asheville. So not a lot of changes in this particular request. And again, it was previously approved by council. It has been to the TRC on July 17th, and that body recommended approval with conditions. And the Planning and Zoning Commission heard this at their August 2nd meeting, and they approved it unanimously. Any questions on the rezoning piece of this? If not, I'm going to let Rachel kind of pick it up right there and get into the next agenda item. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Roney.
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious about, are we really clear on our side what the gap is on? It just seems like with economy of scale, you would want to go higher to get the most out of a development of this, building affordable housing and adding housing to the neighborhood that's this close to transit. It's really close. So are we really clear on we don't want to fill a gap to get to 5 additional units? We're choosing to keep it short and smaller as costs go up?
Yeah, I don't know the specific answer to that, Councilwoman Roney. Rachel may be able to provide some insight. And if Rachel's not, of course, we can have that information available.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We might need that answer for Tuesday, but I imagine it could come up.
We can certainly provide additional details. I know some of the feedback that was received from the Wecan neighborhood was associated with concerns around building height. So making a lower footprint and reducing the number of units is actually more aligned with the feedback that we received from community members who had concerns about the impact of this development in their neighborhoods. And while it does change the per unit subsidy level, it's around $60,000. I don't have the exact number now, and it was in the 50s whenever we had 47 units. That's still well below the $80,000 per unit threshold that we have as our standard metric for subsidizing affordable housing.
Okay, and I just was thinking about when we talk about a neighborhood, there will be 5 people or families that won't be able to call this a neighborhood because there won't be those units. So just wanted to name that as we prepare for Tuesday.
Thank you for that feedback. And Allison, if you'll keep this up, Ben has really highlighted the majority of what I was planning to cover. So new business item A is consideration of a resolution approving the revised unit count and affordability levels for the Housing Trust Fund loan associated with this project. And as Ben mentioned, in addition to a Housing Trust Fund loan, there were also 2 grants that the city contributed to this project. So the grants were for pre-development activities as well as the purchase of the land. Those 2 items plus the $904,000 Housing Trust Fund loan totaled to $2.5 million in city investment in this project. So on Monday, the 21st, the Housing and Community Development Committee will be considering those revised terms to the Housing Trust Fund loan. And then on Tuesday, City Council will be asked to approve those revisions. The one note I do want to highlight is on that 4th bullet where Ben mentioned that 21 of the units or 50% will be reserved for housing choice vouchers. That information is correct, but we also have confirmation from the developer that they plan to exceed this goal and lease 90% of the units or 37 total units to voucher holders. The other note, I know Councilmember Roney, you referenced wanting to make sure we're able to accommodate housing. The bedroom mix has changed slightly. And so while we have a reduced number of total units that will be included in this development, we do actually have an increased number of 3-bedroom units. So there was originally going to be 3 3-bedroom units as part of this development. There will now be 4 3-bedroom units as a part of this development, which of course does lend itself to supporting families as part of the development. So that is all I had to cover on new business item A. Allison, you're welcome to take down the visual now. Thank you. And so moving on to new business item B, this is the Strategic Event Partnership Program. The revisions to this program have been discussed at both the Planning and Economic Development Committee as well as the Policy, Finance, and HR Committee. And this is a 3-part action item. First is a resolution authorizing the city manager to discontinue the city's previous Strategic Event Partnership Program. Second is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with the Asheville Area Arts Council to administer a grant program to reimburse cultural and arts related nonprofit events for certain city fees and charges. And then third is entering into an agreement with the Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project for the production of the Asheville City Market in years 2024 through 2026. I am going to now turn it over to the city attorney to cover item C.
Thank you, Rachel. And again, I'm going to try to give maybe perhaps a little more detail on this because I do want to be clear. I know this is one item that you have been receiving quite a lot of public input about. This is a set of proposed, what I'm calling technical amendments to 2 separate ordinances that are already on the books right now, both of which deal with what has been termed solicitation. But depending upon where you look, this is often also referred to in other legal sources as panhandling or even begging. All of those essentially refer to the same item. So I generally use the term solicitation, which is how it is defined in the city's ordinance. So as I mentioned, we currently have 2 city ordinances. The first is section 11-5. The second is 11-14. As a result of a couple of recent federal Supreme Court cases, there has been some change in the law around First Amendment activity, which includes solicitation. As a result of that, my department has looked closely at our existing ordinances and determined that in order to maintain the defensibility and enforceability of our existing ordinances, we need to do a couple of updates. These updates are primarily intended to maintain our legal defensibility on these 2 ordinances in consistency with those 2 new Supreme Court cases. Now, along with this, while we were in that process, we discovered that some of those amendments would also have the effect of cleaning up some ambiguity in our existing ordinances, as well as adding some additional detail and specificity in order to make them much more clear, not just for the public at large, but for city staff who are charged with enforcing council's ordinances. Now, when this matter went before the Environment and Safety Committee on July 25th, which did recommend this unanimously to go before the council for approval, there were a couple of additional what I call substantive amendments proposed. City staff listened to those, and we decided that we were going to begin analyzing those substantive amendments. Now, I will tell you that generally speaking, those dealt with looking at what we currently designate as high traffic zones, which are areas within the city that have additional restrictions around solicitation and some additional potential restrictions around what I call roadside solicitation. Now, what we've determined very quickly is that there is a need for some additional interdepartmental analysis and data gathering around those potential substantive amendments. And in order for us to complete that analysis, as well as engage some external stakeholders as well, we felt like some additional time may be necessary in order to bring those particular proposals to City Council in the most complete and defensible way. Our proposal, therefore, is that we phase these two options so that before at your next meeting on the 22nd, we only bring to you the proposal that was originally brought before the Environment Safety Committee that only dealt with the technical amendments recommended by my office as needed to bring us back into consistency with the existing federal law. The additional substantive amendments will continue to be analyzed, data collected internally with multiple departments within the city, and then we would bring that back to the Environment and Safety Committee as a separate set of proposed amendments for additional review, public comment, before it would come back before council. So to reiterate, our proposal that's coming before you on the 22nd only deals with the original technical amendments that are the catalyst being those two Supreme Court cases which suggested we need to update some of our language. As part of this, there are no new proposals that are substantive, in my opinion, being added for your consideration at this time. This means that there will be no additional penalties, no new restrictions included in the proposal before you. These are only language amendments, again, in my opinion, and I can go into more detail with anybody who has questions about that at this time, but I wanted to make it clear for you and the public that the two additional substantive amendments are still being analyzed, and that would come back before the Environment Safety Committee in late September for additional consideration as part of a separate phase. Now, with that, I'll try to be quiet and ask if there are any questions at this point. Yes, Councilwoman Ullman.
Thanks, Brad. Just saying that wanted to speak up on appreciation. I think that, I personally, and I'm sure others have been hearing a lot of feedback on kind of both sides of those phase 2 options. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to split them up. Phase 1, we just got to make sure that we're updating the language to be in compliance, if you will. So I see just moving forward those, not waiting on those, making sure that the existing ordinance is tip-top shape. And then, just having more time for more deep listening in the community and more conversation.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ullman. Any additional questions about this proposal? Again, I'll be giving a full presentation before the council on Tuesday night, and that'll be available with the other materials that are published publicly probably tomorrow. Yes, Councilmember Ullman. Councilmember Roney.
Thank you. So I did submit some concerns to my colleagues already this week, so this shouldn't be a surprise. But what I'm hearing is that we're going to spend more of public resources, including staff time, to continue on this path, which I feel very strongly is a distraction on issues around an ordinance expansion that's not going to solve the very serious issues we were facing in our community, but does open us up to a whole lot more problems. And so while I hear that we're sending this back to committee, I think we should stop and not push this forward. So I just wanted to be really clear in reiterating that.
Any additional questions, comments about this particular agenda item?
And Brad, if I could, and I just want a clarification, Councilmember Roney, when you're saying not push this forward, you're not saying the technical things that will be coming on Tuesday, which are language clarifications, those things. You're talking about the additional amendments that were discussed as part of the council. Okay, great. Okay, I just wanted.
For example, I
to
know
make
there's
sure.
one conversation that folks aren't really looking at is like the 6 to 10 feet. Well, most of our sidewalks are 10 feet. So are we really talking about having a measuring stick and making sure that no one asks or gives anything on a sidewalk? This is a serious issue of staff time that, number one, doesn't address the really serious issues that we have committed to our strategic priorities going all hands on deck. And two, it's creating more problems.
Councilmember Roney, if I can, you brought up a point that I think, if I may have just a point of privilege here to take that particular item up, I think this is really important. Amongst the recommendations from the Environment and Safety Committee, we were asked to also look at the current existing high traffic zones as well as additional regulation around roadside panhandling. But there was this discussion about 6 and 10 feet. And I do think that that's something that's not entirely clear in the public. And I want to make sure that everybody's aware that that is something that we are actually bringing forward as phase 1. So that is something that was brought up for the first time, in part because let me tell you where this is coming from. As part of our proposed technical amendments, we found 2 locations in the existing ordinances that talked about geographical limitations, distances, but it didn't define the distances. One area just said at, and another said in close proximity to. So we felt that those kind of ambiguities are the very things that we need to address, not just for clarity's sake, but also to bring us into compliance with the existing law from case law decisions. So we propose to add in a distance of 6 feet. There was some discussion about maybe 10 feet. We've actually gone in and done some additional research on that. And we have found that existing federal Supreme Court law in similar situations has upheld a regulation around similar type of restrictions for a distance of 8 feet. So we're actually coming forward to you as part of our technical amendments to, instead of utilizing terms like in close proximity to, which we don't understand, we've added in the term 8 feet. And I see that your hand's raised, but I'll finish just by saying this. It only applies in 2 spaces. This is not a general prohibition. There is one situation where it only applies to a limitation of panhandling at transit stops. So for many, many years, we have had a prohibition around panhandling at a transit stop. And it actually said in close proximity to a transit stop. So it didn't define how far that was. So our recommendation to you is just to say that means 8 feet. That means be at least 8 feet away from a transit stop. The second situation only applies to those occurrences where someone has attempted to solicit some sort of a donation and the individual has declined. They've said, no, you are not allowed to continue to solicit. It basically said, again, in close proximity to that person. So we wanted to define that. And based upon the Supreme Court decision, we've suggested that we define 8 feet so that everybody's clear what that means. Those are the only 2 places that that particular distance applies. There are no other restrictions around where you can and cannot do this other than one previously existing limitation around soliciting near an ATM or other financial institution, which we are not suggesting any changes to that. So I did want to provide that clarification. Thank you for the allowance. Councilwoman Roney.
So I want to tell a good story and a hopeful story for our community, but it also has to be a true story. And what I'm hearing is that there is, in the name of clarity, an addition, right? So it is an addition or expansion or whatever word we want to call it, but it's not just a leveling, because otherwise we would still be in that ambiguity. We have chosen a distance that we are going to discuss on Tuesday, and that is in its own form an expansion.
I appreciate the comments on all fronts. And again, any other questions on this particular item before we move forward? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Brad. Last item on the agenda under new business is appointments to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that's the last item on the August 22nd agenda. I will then launch into an overview of our council committees. And the first committee we're going to reference is the August 21st Housing and Community Development Committee. Council has actually already been briefed on this agenda, so I'll just provide a few quick reminders, but I do want to note the revised start time of this meeting. The meeting was originally scheduled to begin at 2 o'clock. We have moved up the start time to 1:30, and the intent behind that revised start time is to make sure council has the ability, committee members have the ability to attend the Thomas Wolfe panel meeting that's scheduled to begin at 3 o'clock at Harrah's on the 21st. So that is the primary reason for the revised start time. But by way of quick reminder, we have 3 substantive items on the agenda. First will be an update from Thrive on the affordable housing ecosystem review that they have done, which was funded with $135,000 in city ARPA funds. Next on the agenda is a discussion about reallocating approximately $300,000 in available community development block grant funds to promote accessibility downtown with some ramp and sidewalk work on Patton Avenue. And finally, the committee will make a recommendation related to the Haywood Street development, which we discussed as part of the August 22nd City Council agenda. And I will turn it over to Ben, to cover the Boards and Commissions Committee.
Thank you, Rachel. So we have our Boards and Commissions Committee on August 22nd. As referenced earlier, we have Planning and Zoning Commission interviews. There are 7 applicants for the vacant seats. And what I believe, let me make sure. Yes, and I think what we want to do is make sure that council, of course, these meetings are recorded. So I think the ask is that obviously the board and commission committee members will be a part of those interviews, but we want to make sure that the full council is able to watch those to see the candidates. And of course, those appointments will be made by the full council to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So again, just want to highlight the council that if possible, you want to find an opportunity to either tune in and watch the interviews or watch those at some point before they come to full council for recommendations. We do have 7 applicants and we have 4 possible seats for appointments. We have 1, I think, existing member that's interested and eligible for reappointment. And of course, that leaves us 3 seats that are completely vacant and need new members. The other item on the Boards and Commission is the Asheville Area Riverfront Redevelopment Commission, and that is one of our advisory boards that's been around for some time, and some of the things that they're working on. One of the work plan items was to, and our Urban Forestry Commission recently did this as well, but one of the work plan items was to reevaluate kind of the role and the purpose of that board and what it's there to accomplish. And I think what they've determined is they'd like to propose some changes to the ordinance, to the enabling ordinance, and some of that includes changing the name to the Asheville Buncombe Riverfront Commission. So trying to expand the scope and the footprint of that important work that board does, but also bringing on some new members, Black Mountain, for example, and Swannanoa, and then making some changes to kind of the composition of the membership. So that actually, they came to PED actually earlier this week and kind of reviewed some of that information. They'll come to boards and commissions to do the same thing. And again, since there are some ordinance modifications associated with that, that too will eventually come to full council for consideration. So that is, or Maggie, go ahead. I've probably left something out. So.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to let council know that the boards and commission interviews for the Planning and Zoning Commission start at 9 o'clock on August 22.
Yeah, thank you for that. So that's our 2 items for boards and commissions. If there's not any other questions on that, I will turn it back over to Rachel.
And apologies for the hot potato. I'm actually going to let Deborah cover the Environment and Safety Committee agenda.
Thank you both. There is a lot of items on the Environment and Safety Committee agenda. We meet on the 22nd as well at 11 o'clock. And most of the items are for information, but we do have one item that we're going to ask the committee for action. I'll just run through just very briefly what the items are on the agenda. The Sustainability Advisory Committee will be doing their annual update, talking about accomplishments from the previous year and what they see going forward in terms of some things that they would like to work on. The next item is the Municipal Climate Action Plan. It will be kind of a phase one update, kind of our commitment going into this next fiscal year of things that we feel need to get accomplished in terms of implementing that plan. The floating solar feasibility study will be getting the findings of that assessment and analysis and a path forward and looking at that type of technology. And again, all of these are for information only. But the one for action is the North Carolina statewide mutual aid agreement. And that is a vote to move forward to City Council for consideration. And we do apologize, but it will be on the agenda for August the 22nd as well. So there will be action at the committee, then a request for, and I believe it's on consent for full council action. And then the last item is the work plan development. And this will be pretty much the first time that we kind of, at this committee, rolled up our sleeves to look at upcoming work plan items. And that is all for that committee. And I will turn it back over to Ms. Ronnie.
Can you help me understand why we're using the words mutual aid for that agreement instead of something like resource sharing agreement or something like that? There's a long history of mutual aid going back to the early 1900s that was around workers having to share resources when the government didn't meet their needs.
I do not know the answer to that, but I will have Chief Brzezinski prepared to respond to that. But I believe that we can get that response included in your follow-up information before Tuesday. So hopefully we'll get that to you before Tuesday. Yes, ma'am.
I certainly wouldn't want the words being used to distract from the intention of the work.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. All right. So Rachel, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, so really briefly review of the 8-week agenda. And Allison, if you can pull that up for us. We have made several references to this being the end of summer. So of course, starting back in September, we will have 2 council meetings a month. So our summer break is over. Allison, oh, there we go. So just a couple of quick items to highlight. Importantly, on September 12th, the major item there is council will be asked to adopt the Pack Square Vision Plan. This was recently reviewed and approved by the Planning and Economic Development Committee, and a lot of really great cross-departmental work has happened, led by our planning team, namely Steph Monsendahl, for the great work that's happened there. Then at the September 26th meeting, council will review and consider a recommendation of our annual application to HUD for continuum of care funding, which is about $2 million and covers both HMIS as well as a planning grant. So this is an annual application to support the work of the continuum of care. And then not listed on this 8-week planning agenda, but I do want to note that we're working through a specific date that on either September 12th or September 26th, the City Council will be asked to consider funding for a short-term shelter option that is being recommended and requested by HIAC. And so we're still working through that timeline, but at one of those 2 council meetings, we will be asking council to consider funding a portion of that request. We are hopeful that that request will be a partnership, including funding from Dogwood, Buncombe County, as well as the city. And that concludes the review of the 8-week agenda. I'll note this because I needed a reminder this morning that September 4th is Labor Day. So we do have a holiday coming up that I had meetings scheduled for earlier. So we'll now transition to other issues and updates. And we've got both Jay Dundas and Chris Corral here to talk through McCormick Field zoning changes.
Good morning, Vice Mayor, members of council. Jay Dundas, Capital Projects Director. As we have gotten into the details of the conceptual designs and considerations of the zoning and the site limitations associated with the parcel on which McCormick Field sits, it's become apparent that there are challenges with us meeting the existing site zoning requirements. And so what we're proposing and going to initiate is a process to request conditional zoning. We'll preserve the institutional zoning that is in place right now. So it's presently zoned institutional, but we will have to request a conditional zoning to work through some of the challenges associated with the zoning requirements as they are for institutional zoning in relation to this site. And so we're really early in that process. And so we don't have a lot of detail on that. But we did want to come to council early to provide you with the notice that we are starting this process. That will involve initially a outreach to the community in a notification on August 31st for a public meeting, a neighborhood meeting that is, on September 7th. And those are the early contact with the community. We do believe that preserving the institutional zoning in this is consistent with what we've heard from the community, the neighborhoods, the adjacent neighborhoods, in past public outreach, and really just wanted to provide this information to you early on, and then provide any opportunity for questions. I will say that this is we are at least tentatively estimating a October 24th council approval date.
Or action.
Action. Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
Okay, if there are no questions, we'll then talk about some exciting department director position updates from Deborah and Ben.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. I wish I could say that we have decided on a fire chief, but that is not the case. But I will tell you that we got extremely good responses. We got 69 applicants. We actually started at about 20 something, called it down to 14, and we literally interviewed 14 individuals last week. We have gotten it down to 6 that will be coming for a second interview, and that will be, when I say coming, we won't have them physically come here. We can do this virtually. But we're looking at probably for the second interview sometime late August or early September, and then the decision hopefully sometime early October. But I'm just so pleased with the quality of the candidates and their interests, and they were all so complimentary of the work that Chief Burnett, the foundation that he's built within that department. And I believe that is why we got so much interest to try to, this is a really good position to move into because, again, so much work has been done to create an exemplary department. So very pleased. And I will turn it over to Ben to see if he can give us some really, really good news about our planning director.
Well, I've got great news, and there's nobody happier than me to share this news because I will no longer be the interim planning director. I have really, actually, I've enjoyed getting to know the planning department better, and they're fantastic. What a great group of professionals, and creative and talented staff we have in that department. But I'm really, really happy to announce we have provided an offer and it's been accepted. We had a very robust national search, so it was very competitive. And we are pleased to announce, and hopefully council, you saw this email earlier today, but pleased to announce one of our internal candidates, Stephanie Monson-Dahl, has been selected as our next planning director. So we are, yes, round of applause, very excited about that. We have such, I think it's just, I think it's really a reflection of just how much talent that we have in this organization. And I'm just so excited and happy for Stephanie, for our planning department, for our organization and our city. We've made the announcements to the planning staff, to our leadership, to you council. So this afternoon we'll see announcements go out to the community, and I hope everybody will join me in congratulating Stephanie on her new position. So again, thank you.
Yeah,
Deborah, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, we are extremely proud when we can promote someone from within, especially with Stephanie's tenure, I think about 18 years she's been with the organization. So we're very happy to make that announcement and to do it in a way where it was a national search and she competed and she did very well in the interviews. Councilmember Ullman?
I am so excited to hear about this. Stephanie is one of the more visionary people I've met in Asheville. She really is a planner. She understands what's coming in the future and how to prepare and how to take our current vision and move it forward. I'm so thrilled. It doesn't surprise me that she competes nationally with the best of the best. We just had this talent in our organization so long. I'm so excited for us and for her and thankful she's stepping up to do it.
Thank you. We are as well. All right, Rachel, I think we're getting ready to close out. Other than Brad, you may need something read to go into closed session, I believe.
Unless Rachel has anything else, I believe we'll have a closed session motion to read, and I believe Councilmember Ullman has graciously agreed to do the honors.
Sure did. I definitely have it up right now. Can you resend it to me, please?
Yes.
Oh, maybe I'm seeing it. Okay. I think I might have gotten to it. Okay, 8:17. Yep. All right. I move that the Asheville City Council go into closed session for the following reasons. 1, to prevent disclosure of information that is privileged and confidential pursuant to the laws of North Carolina or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A1. The law that makes the information privileged and confidential is North Carolina General Statute 143-318.10E. For the second reason, number 2, to consult with an attorney employed by the city for matters with respect to which the client attorney privilege between the city and the the city and the attorney must be preserved, including but not limited to the handling of settlement or claim regarding the following. 2, Zachary Hebb versus City of Asheville, having a case file number of WDNC 1:22-CV-00222. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3.
Thank you so much for that, Councilmember Ullman. I will let everybody know that once the Vice Mayor has adjourned, we will move over to a separate second meeting invite that you should have received for the closed session. So, Vice Mayor.
Okay, if no one else have any comments or whatever, then we are adjourned.
We need a second to that motion, please.
This is Shanika. I'll second.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Brad, can you send me that second link, please?
Aye.
Maggie, do we need to just say all in favor, aye, or just?
You're good. Mhm.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Raise your hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brad, this is a virtual meeting. Do we need to do a roll call?
Yes, we do need to do a roll call for this, Maggie. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, we have a motion and a second, and at this time, we'd like to do a roll call. Maggie, Councilwoman Owen,
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley. Councilwoman Mosley has left the meeting.
Aye.
Oh, she's here? Okay. Councilwoman Smith,
Aye.
Councilwoman Lurie,
Aye.
and myself. Aye. Okay, motion passes. And that was
We stand adjourned.
Maggie.
All right. Does everybody have the link to this other meeting? If
Can
not,
someone send me?
okay. Councilmember Mosley needs it.
Councilwoman Mosley, I just sent via email.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. All right.
Okay, meeting is,
Bye.
thank you.